This is another installment of our exploration, our overview of Wraith the Oblivion's 20th Anniversary Edition, where we go through chapter by chapter, rising to great highs and falling sometimes to great lows.
Okay, now we're in the midpoint of Book 2. We're looking at Chapter 8. And here's where we'll be able to really finally and totally establish the pattern of what's going on with the writing of the book, right? Why am I alternately reacting positively and strongly? We find in Chapter 8 that we're in a similar situation to what we had in Chapter 5, meaning we're talking directly to the players as players. Most specifically, we're speaking to the storyteller because we're in Book 2. But we're speaking to the players as the players about the mechanics of the game. So there is a reduced opportunity to get confused about modes of play, how we might approach play, whether we come at it from the point of view of a strong authorial hand, a single guiding light of kind of action and then from the player's reaction, which makes sense in, as we talked about, this context. Or if we're going to approach it from a world of mystery with the players free to move around it. Both points of view have been presented as one point of view in the advice chapters. But when we get into the dramatic systems chapters, right, which is coming up in Chapter 9, or when we look at this particular chapter, if I can find the first page, right, we are in Chapter 8 looking specifically at systems. Chapter 8 starts on page 279, has two short paragraphs there, which tells us basically that this entire chapter is going to be split into three parts, and these are very useful for navigating things. The first thing is to look at the environment. So they call them the Wraith specific elements of the scene. So these are haunts and maelstroms, injury, and the conditions of being a Wraith in their world. So that's very handy, and it's right at the beginning of the chapter, so it's easy to find. I like that. So this is all categorized under the heading of setting. All right. So setting starts out looking at reaping, like you're a brand new Wraith, you've just appeared. What happens? Okay. And or what can happen, or what is required to happen. This is all very detailed. I like it a lot. There is a sidebar called Optional Rule, Crucible Scenes, for very specific, direct, brief advice on how to do a transition from playing, like doing a prelude with the character being alive, and then transitioning through death and into Wraithly society. That's well done. And it's nice and quick, so it's an easy reminder and a focus point. We got the shroud, how it works. It helps us put in context exactly why urban environments with large populations would have far less instances of people reporting ghosts, even though there's very likely to be more ghosts there, and why it is that these distant cabins in the woods have these, ghostly problems, and the types of ghost stories that are told in these different places. And good sidebar on the shroud and the fog about, did you hear that? And just how the activity of the dead and the restless manifest in the real world, or the world of the living, right? We have our fog ratings, and they're all explained. There's lots of good detail, right? Good, brief detail. This is the sort of writing that we're looking for in this kind of book, in this kind of section. Then we get into maelstroms, which are produced with, again, a great deal of detail, which is excellent. Haunts, the places that offer more protection and maybe more advantages to our circles of Wraiths. So a very important thing to understand and to consider. Greater mention of haunts and their characteristics would have been valuable earlier on, such as in Chapter 4, but it is clearly explained as a background in chapter 5. So it's not like we're unaware of it, but having the bulk of the detail be here makes it easy to find, but also makes it easy to hold in your head as an add-on rather than a core idea. Right? So we've established a lot of excellent core ideas about how to view the game, and it would have been a higher level of excellence had this been a part of that. But injury is excellent, really, really clear, and some funny callbacks to earlier editions like the rules of ouch and excuse me, and a very, very specific discussion of the corporeal states of Wraith, giving us corporeal, right? Their normal, solid, wraithly plasm. Incorporeal, what happens when they pass through objects or objects pass through them. Wavering, a special condition produced by being beaten to a pulp. And material, right? Physically present in the land of the living and what special conditions apply to it. And harrowed, right? Separating that out as a specific case. So this is all in a little sidebar right there. That's excellent. That would be something I'd want to see on a new Wraith screen, for example. Types of damage are explained here. And then following damage comes healing. And then we jump back into sources of injury. I probably would have done that the other way around, but it doesn't really matter. So that's quite detailed as well, and it's familiar to players of Storyteller. Now they start up this section with a, please be aware this doesn't follow the rules the same way as all the other games, and that's a good caveat to make, and it makes it easy to move through. So good one. The middle part of this chapter is called perceptions. These are the things that Wraiths might experience or Wraiths might believe. So it starts with transcendence, different views on transcendence. Of course, there's a lack of evidence, so all of these things are legends, stories, religions, cults, and things we've heard about, right? So that's well done. There's a little sidebar called the 8 Truths of Transcendence, right, as a model for how Wraiths navigate their restless lives. So we've got the calm through the thunder, enlightened society, and storytelling transcendence. And there's playing transcendence as another sidebar, right? So again, excellent. This is all communicating in-game setting material to you, and it's doing so with clarity and brevity. And more importantly, it makes me want to play the game. So the last part of this division is character development. That opens up with experience points. It gives us, the traditional Storyteller, reasons for experience, right? The automatic point, the learning curve point, so on and so forth. And it gives us clear advice about when to give them, how often, right? At what rate, and the cost for things, of course, and justifications for spending is made even clearer than I remember it being, but I'm going to go back and check. But there's this great sidebar right here on page 302 called Experience Tips. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 don'ts. And while nobody really likes to be told don't do this, it makes it much clearer to understand and follow the advice. Like, don't purchase or increase a trait if you can't reasonably justify how you acquired it or what you did to improve it. Right? There are points like that, just to make everything fit together, especially from the in-character perspective. Right? So this is one of those things that's screaming, play the game in character, explore it as a set personality, ground it in a world, and treat it as if it were real, rather than approach it like an avatar. The more of these pages we go through, the more evidence we see that the typical belief is that's how the game is supposed to be played. But there are moments when it goes the other way. So it talks about the end of stories. It talks about learning new abilities, mastering arcanoi, raising attributes, increasing your willpower, strengthening your backgrounds. Now there's an optional rule in here that I wanted to talk about for compensation for backgrounds. The only negative, the only nitpick that I have, and it feels like a nitpick, is it says, well, hey, backgrounds can easily be destroyed. This is true. Right? So you're investing these experience points to develop the backgrounds, but some players can get it in their head that they're buying something like an ability or raising an attribute that's permanent. So when those things get destroyed, they perhaps justifiably feel ripped off. They don't think of that as a gamble, they think of it as a purchase, a permanent change. So it gives us a suggestion. One, just say, yeah, well, that's how it is, right? You need backgrounds if you want to progress deeply into the game. It is a risk. It's a risk, and that's going to heighten roleplay and experience and make things, much more dramatic. Go for it. That's one way, and that's a good way, and that's included in here. Their second method is like, well, if you're upset, I can refund half of your experience points. No explanation given about what justifies this refund. There's just advice about, hey, you've now given a refund of experience points back to the player. Be careful that they don't spend it on overpowering their character in response. Instead, this much space, and it's a full half page, 2 columns, this much space could have been devoted into talking about what the experience point process of building a background really is, and how you could offer a discounted price for rebuilding that background, that same background with a different explanation, right? Because of the past experience, it's now easier for them. Or you could do something along those lines to talk about what experience points represents, rather than treating experience points like some kind of currency to be traded back and forth. All right. But anyway, c'est la vie, or c'est l'amour. We move into gaining passions. An excellent sidebar, again, half a page. Right, there it is. Called Writing the Perfect Passion. Excellent advice. We've got waning passions through neglect or harrowings. We've got resolving passions, another important aspect. Then we move into fetters. Right? All of this stuff is well written, clear. It's not too long, not too short. Right? Losing fetters and acquiring fetters, new fetters. A great optional rule about fetters changing over time. That's fantastic. More art resolving fetters. Then there's talking about sleep, and that ends on page 311, chapter 8. I like chapter 8. I think chapter 8 is extremely well done. It's not without its problems. This is a huge book with multiple authors. It's not without its problems. These are not insurmountable problems. They are comments. These are commentary. These are reactions. Other people may feel entirely differently. They don't want to get into the sort of detail that I might. They want to, make things more abstract so they're easier to handle. And that's all cool, right? So tomorrow, or our next installment, will be chapter 9, drama.